But yeah, I agree with you that there is no such thing as bad trip. I don't believe in bad trips, really. I believe that there is just a trip that brings out something that is subconscious within you, that is negative within you. But this is medicine that we are talking about. Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I am your host. My name is Karolina, and I'm the connection catalyst. Today's guest is Sandra, a psychedelic explorer. Welcome to the show, Sandra. How are you doing?
Hi, Karolina. I'm good. I'm really good.
I'm super glad to have you on our podcast today. And I would really love to dive deep into the topic of psychedelics. And just a little disclaimer for you guys who listen to this, please remember to only do these kind of things like psychedelics with a person who is, who knows what they are doing. Never do it alone. Never just, try it, and be careful, and only do it obviously in the places and countries where it's legal, so that you don't have any problems. So yeah, we want to talk a little bit about psychedelics and about weed as medicine as well. So I would like to start with this little question. What, in your view, are psychedelics, and how people can use it as a tool for healing and for self-growth? Because I feel like in present times, maybe not so right now as in the past, but still a lot of people have this stigma around psychedelics, that it's drugs, that it's like bad for us, that it's like not something that we should do. So how would you, describe your perspective on psychedelics as a tool that can help you improve your life?
Yeah, as you just mentioned, it is a tool, so it can be used correctly and incorrectly. And I think we start calling it drugs and associating it with some negative connotation when we use it as a coping mechanism, and it rather becomes an addiction. But as you said, it is a tool, so depending on the person using it, it can have different kind of benefits or disadvantages because it can go both ways. So I think the first thing would always be to ask the person for their intention and the reason for doing psychedelic. And I think that's the most important thing to begin with. Then there are different variety of psychedelics. They can be also used different depending on intention. So like it depends. You're asking me more about all of them, right?
Yeah, just generally psychedelics as a tool, because I feel like there is a lot of people who are young, like teenagers who just want to explore and check different things. But a lot of these young people, they don't actually know what they are doing. And then I feel like a lot of them can just traumatize themselves by, abusing the substances not in the way that they should be used. So I want to talk a little bit about like just generally psychedelics as a tool, but also the safety and certain settings that you think are the most important if someone wants to try to use this kind of substance.
Yeah. So as you said, like it can be abused in because lack of knowledge and lack of good setting and people, of course, because I would say the first thing would be to understand your mindset and where you're standing in your life at that phase of life. Because if there are issues to resolve or you're really feeling low and you are not in control of your emotions, it can be overwhelming, especially if you're not in the right setting with the right people who can provide you this sense of safety and support during your trip. And some trips, for example, like with mushrooms, like psilocybin, it can get really overwhelming. So in that sense, you have to be prepared to face your fears and fears the issues that can arise so you can consciously deal with them. And for that would be, of course, safety of the drug itself, like of the medicine, let's say. Then you, depending on which medicine you use, to know where it comes from or who you're buying it from or getting it from, and which amount is needed. Many drugs also need to be tested because, I mean, it depends which drugs we're talking about. And yeah, so the setting goes with also the people. I think it's necessary when I talk, especially if we talk about mushrooms. If you take your big trip, you really need a trip sitter, which is a guide or the person who you would trust to guide your trip, or not necessarily even guide, to just be there in case you need something. It's usually like, and it has to be a psychological safety too, because for example, you might trust person on a specific level, but when it comes to deeper things, you might not feel comfortable with the person or you don't feel familiar, So I would say these things is like finding the correct, a good thing for you. Because, like, for example, mushrooms don't work for just for everybody. There are people who's, you have to also know your history of maybe mental disorders that you're not aware of in your family, because that's also an important thing. Psychedelic drugs affect your psyche, and that means many things from subconscious can come up, and you have to know how to deal with them. So safety, making research about yourself, kind of being knowing yourself, because I don't think that's a tool for people who didn't take time to get to know themselves or work on their subconscious patterns and things like that.
Yeah, you need to have a massive like introspection before you reach out for anything like that. And that's why I also talk about it, because yeah, I want young people to know that it can be used really as like a spiritual tool, you know, not as something that you take on a party and just and go and like dance and just like completely lose yourself. It can be used really to explore yourself on the highest level, but your intention and what you're doing it for needs to be that you want to explore yourself, because otherwise, you know, where your intention goes, you direct the energy there. So if you focus on only having fun, the substance is going to maybe give you only fun, and sometimes not even that if you're among people with like lower vibration. And if you really, you know, if you do it at home, if you do it in safe environment, just with like nice calming music in the background with the people you love and you know that they're going to support you, then it's a completely different experience. And I've had experiences with people, for example, on mushrooms, where they, you know, they said like they have never experienced anything like this, because we did it in more like spiritual and higher perspective way, and they have been taking it, you know, just on the party, and it was a completely different experience. So I think this is also just important to remember, like, what are you doing it for? And that leads me also to the question about marijuana specifically. And I know that you are quite an expert when it comes to this topic, because you've tried a lot of different kinds and you use it as a tool for yourself to heal yourself, to, you know, almost like a therapy, I would say. So, yeah, so tell us a little more about it. Like, how do you use it? Like, what you would how do you recommend people to use it, and for whom maybe it's not the best tool?
Yeah, again, I would start that cannabis is also a psychedelic, psychoactive tool, and it really affects your psyche. So if you're not ready, or you don't think that you have some mental disorders and there are things which might not benefit you, don't approach cannabis as some weed like to smoke with. I mean, it can be a lifestyle, of course, I'm not saying that, but we're talking specifically about healing methods. And for that, you again have to have an intention. And for example, in my personal story, my intention is usually to process things. I like processing things using cannabis, because it helps me to understand or break down specific mental issues or situations in my life in a way that I can comprehend them from different perspectives. I can provide myself that perspective because I also am interested in psychology. Thus, it makes it more interesting experience when you consume cannabis. If, first of all, you can consume it in different ways. Like not all people are cool with smoking. Some people prefer to vape or dab or even have edibles. But these experiences also going to be different. An experience from people who, for example, were using cannabis for years, and the person who just starting is obviously going to be very different as well. So it depends on the person we're talking about. But let's generalize a little. And let's say on a daily use, you have to know your dose. First of all, yeah, cannabis, where it comes from again, because there's so much chemicals in our days, how the way it's growing, because it gets legalized all over the world. Little by little, people start understanding what cannabis can bring it to us. I think the world really can benefit from that, especially if we stop stigmatizing it around negativity. And because it's a big business, it's a big industry, and it has its downs and ups, and you know, the way people perceive, because you know, many people are sitting in jail for contributing to cannabis development. In a meanwhile, in other countries, people are consuming and saying it's cool. Like, so I think this is the first thing that people have to understand, like where cannabis comes from, and have respect for it and treat it as such. And once they start consuming it, also knowing your dose, knowing how you want to consume it, and for which reason. I would say the best tool would be if we use it as a therapy, we use it as a therapy. Then we use journaling, we use communicating to the self, connecting to the self, using different practices together with cannabis. It's not just like us hitting a joint, laying down. I mean, it can be that too, but if we're talking about work, then you work with it, you smoke and you work. You can even create a program for yourself or adjust it together with specific program which you're doing. For example, cognitive behavior or some, I don't know, there's different kinds. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it, but there's different types of therapies. Combining with cannabis can really help too.
So what are your favorite tools to use after you smoke? Like, for example, you mentioned journaling. What else is like your personal favorite?
Yeah, for me, it started, for example, topic of relationships, and I'm very interested in that topic. So let's say when we come into relations with different kind of people, with different kind of relationships, including friendships or romantic relationships, we think about things from our more emotional trigger perspective, which is like the first reactive thing. When I consume cannabis, I have opportunity to lay back and kind of reconsider my own thoughts and actions, write them down, and see if that's in alignment with who I truly want to be. And when I do journaling, I can express, for example, I really like this method. For example, when you have a lot of like negative, painful emotions and you don't know how to process them, cannabis can help with that while you're doing journaling. For example, you smoke a little, you put some music, or if you need to, create a space, and then you start journaling all the negative emotions out or things that should trouble you without filtering, like no filter. The idea is that you don't think who would read, think nothing. You just like purely get it out of your system. After that, you can read it if you want to. It's not even necessary, because the main thing is that you got it out of your system. Then you're aware, you feel lighter after that. And then you can think about things, what you would want to change and how can you approach the situation in a different way for the next time. So it's like a self-reflection through the journaling. I personally do it on the video because I enjoy first of all, seeing myself, hearing myself, and then I'm always able to come back to it and see what I was thinking that day and how it worked for me, and if I want to next time do things differently, because I already, it's connection with yourself, I would say.
Yeah, and actually, this method of recording yourself on a video is actually really cool. I remember when I first saw that you're doing it, and you could like scroll and see the videos like 5 years ago, who you were and how you were expressing yourself, and versus now, I was just like, wow, I regret that I haven't recorded myself on the camera, because I would see my growth. Because sometimes when you are growing so much and you're healing and you're changing, it's kind of even hard to come back to the perspectives that you had years ago, because you kind of simply forget, after you just remove all these filters of the reality that you once had, then it's just not even that easy to feel into the perspective and the consciousness you had like before you healed all this stuff. So it's a very, very good tool generally, not only with weed, I think, just for yourself to, from time to time to record yourself, to share your perspective, your thoughts, your feelings. And then in 5 or 10 years time, you're going to thank yourself that you did that, because you would be like, wow, I've changed so much. I'm so proud of myself and my journey and where I'm at right now. Because in comparison, you probably have grown a lot. So I really love this tool, and thanks for reminding me of it. And I'm going to do it for sure. And so, yeah. So speaking of marijuana more, I want to ask about the kinds, because people who have never done it before, who maybe had like a perspective that, oh, it's a drug, I don't want to do this, and now they are maybe opening a little bit more up to this idea. What kind of, because there are different types of weed, and so what type would you recommend for someone? Could be general, who haven't, who hasn't tried it before, and what kind of certain settings would you recommend for the first time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted to mention also. For example, we have like sativa, we have indica, and we have hybrid. And there's also, depending on our day, like right now in industry, there's many chemicals put in. So they really enhance the experience, which I don't think is good, because it's not organic, it's not real, and it affects our psyche differently. So it's important to find a really good cannabis for your consumption and know for which reason. And for example, if we're talking about like not because indica would work more better for the evening, we're going to sleep, we're reducing anxiety, for working in different kind of things. But when we talk about self-reflection, you need to be more active, so you have to be in the right mindset as well. And then I would recommend obviously sativa. And for that, you would have to find a place where you can really know where your weed comes from. And I think this is really a very, very important thing. And what did you ask me later?
Yeah, so sativa is more like an upbeat energy, kind of high energy kind, and indica is more like calming and relaxing, and more like, when you see all these people like in the movies when they just smoke weed and lay on the couch and eat massive amounts of food and watch TV, that's probably indica, where they are like super passive and and they just got high, and you see the movies sometimes about exactly, getting stoned. So you can get stoned with indica, but you're gonna get more like hypey with sativa. And I would actually personally recommend sativa for the first time, just because it can give you a little bit more energy to, and as you said, it's good if you want to do some self-reflection, or just, to be kind of not to get too lazy and not to just straight away get munchies and go get some food, but to actually like be active and do something. And so, it's actually really good to mention, because I know people who have been smoking, let's say 3 years in a row every single day, which I'm not really a big fan of, to do it on a daily basis like that. If someone is doing it out of the addiction rather than self-reflection and therapy. And everyone has their own body and their own preferences, but I know that we need to be really careful with weed, because for some people it can work really as an addictive, not physically but mentally. You can get addicted to it. Physically you're not going to get any side effects when you quit it, but mentally you can get extremely addicted. And I know people who have, for example, lost the willingness to do anything. They became quite ignorant and quite passive, quite neutral to anything. Like nothing was making them feel happy, nothing was making them feel bad. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to talk about as well, that of course, as we said at the beginning, it is a tool. So some people, it's like a knife. You can use a knife to cut fruits and vegetables, but you can use a knife to hurt someone. So you need to be really careful. And that's why we are, mentioning it over and over again. Do it with a guide. Do it with someone who knows what they are doing and who knows where the substance comes from, whether it's, marijuana or something else, and who knows how to help you in case something is happening. And, if you do it with people you love, they will probably tell you if you're exaggerating with the amounts, or if you're, not behaving like yourself. So with these kind of substances, we just need to be really careful. So it's good to always, do some research before you do it, and just really get familiar with, with what you're signing up for. Right?
Yeah. But I just also wanted to mention that actually it does not create a physical addiction, but it does create physical withdrawals. Because if you're consuming cannabis for many years on a daily, when you withdraw, you will go for the same withdrawal as you go with many drugs, which is like sweating, inability to sleep, overthinking, and many mental disorders can come out.
Mm-hmm.
Because it does work. Yeah, but it's about long-term consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a thing. So it also, once a person decides to quit after long-term consumption, they do have to do it gradually, because there will be withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
They will,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Especially insomnia is one of the most terrible ones, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lack of appetite, or opposite, it depends how your brain works. They also can start eating way more. So people who have bad relationship with food can also have issues with that, because as you said, you mentioned munchies, but not all weed causes munchies. And unfortunately, because it's not legalized in many places and it's not studied well enough and not shown to people in the right light to educate themselves about cannabis, it is an issue, because people get it off market and then they just consume it in how it is in our world. So yeah, and munchies become like one of those things. But actually, there is weed that does not create like this appetite so much. Because there's weed that makes you want to eat more, but there's weed that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because we have lack of choice on the market. black market.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's different. But once it's legalized, once you have opportunity to know your weed, a percentage of cannabinoids in it, you can have a choice and have more like aware experience with this, which is more safe and I think better, but it takes time for society to kind of get to know it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I feel like more and more countries also have CBD as like the first step to, first step to hemp in a way. Like, and CBD is getting so popular. And I personally am using CBD before I go to bed, and I found it quite relaxing and calming. And it's actually very good because it doesn't have any THC, which is this chemical compound that gets you high, let's say. So for all these people who don't know, or maybe who are too kind of hesitant to use marijuana as a tool, you can always use CBD and you're not going to get high. The only thing you're going to get is relaxation or maybe just some new neural pathways in your brain, because it works perfectly for your brain. It helps you reprogram specific patterns as well. It helps you calm down, relax. So have you personally used CBD?
I have. It was a bit difficult for me to really get hooked on it because the difference is that I was consuming THC cannabis for a while, and then CBD wouldn't work for me on the same level. But I know when I had some physical issues, or for example, joint pains or headaches, or generally dealing with anxiety, it's a good thing. But it has to be used long term in a specific doses, and I feel like it doesn't necessarily has to be smoked. I believe it's better in oil, but in a good quality oil. And again, you have to know your sources.
Yes, and I do it with oil just under my tongue, and I just keep it there for like 30 seconds for the oil to kind of like sink into my body, and then I can swallow it. So yeah, CBD is a great starter for people who are not that familiar with hemp itself.
It doesn't. It's actually also can just be a thing because there are people who, for example, don't want to consume THC because of the psychoactive thing in it. But you can also use CBD for healing anxiety, I think. But it has to be also methodical.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know in which days what to take and which amount, and more. But still continue then working on things like a therapy, if we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, because as we said, this is a tool. So all these kind of substances, I always compare it to like you go upstairs and you see the perspective from upstairs and you are kind of, let's say, tripping, quote unquote. And then when you are after the trip, you go down, but you might be one step up, one step ahead. But you are doing in your life, in your everyday life, when you're not tripping, you're doing everything you can to get to this higher level, but using other things like exercising, like meditation, like contemplation or drawing or art or whatever it is for you to bring you to the state of higher consciousness, because this is what psychedelic do. And psyche is mind, and delios from Greek, I think, is reveal. So it's something that reveals your soul, reveals your mind to you. So you can go there on this higher level, see the perspective that you have from this level, and then really do everything in your power in your everyday life to gain this perspective and get closer and closer and closer to it, even without using any substances. So, for substances like we mentioned, mushrooms, for example, I don't recommend to do it very often, maybe like once per, half a year or maybe even a year for some people, or maybe even less frequently, because once you get this high perspective and you see what's there, then you can, the process of integration after the trip can be that you write down what you experience, you reflect on it, you do some things that the trip brought you to understand, and then you implement all of that into your life. And it might take you a long time to integrate the whole experience, but yeah, it's just a shower. It's just a way shower. It's not something like to use on a daily basis, or as a coping mechanism, as you mentioned before, or as something that you need and you're attached to for example, your self-growth?
I don't think you can do mushrooms on a daily. You're gonna get
No,
cuckoo.
but you can do microdose every few days. That's for sure.
But that's again therapy. It's again a conscious approach to it, because that's a combination of psychedelics and therapy. Because psychedelics on their own, they are tools, but depending on how you use them, they will change the direction. And that's why I'm like, mushrooms, as you said, integration. If you have to integrate all the knowledge you get from that experience and then implement in your daily life and try to learn how to do that with your sober mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of tools and therapy and healing, what are your favorite tools apart from psychedelics and just, all the kind of plant medicine substances? What are your other favorite tools that, you don't need to get high to to work on yourself?
I would say, we spoke earlier with you, not in this one, but generally like about the rape. I would say that's a really something that doesn't really get you high, but it helps to clean your energy field and kind of sober you up in a way. And it's a good tool also before using any other psychedelics or big trips, because you can prepare your energy field, and if you fast for some time before, or clean your body and detox and eat well and things like that, I think that can be also useful, if that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Any tool that you would recommend to people who are listening that, maybe they haven't heard of rape. And I perceive it as a very nice tool as well. It's like a condensed tobacco that you not sniff, but someone is blowing into your nose or you blow into your own nose, and it doesn't feel good, okay? It doesn't feel good, especially the first time, but it's really calming, it's really relaxing, and after you do it, you feel really good. And even my mom did it once, you guys, and she, of course, didn't enjoy the experience itself of taking it, but afterwards she was so just blissed out, just so relaxed, and she actually thinks that it's quite a great tool. So that means something if my mom enjoyed this. But yeah, I love rape, but it's also, as you said before, everyone has different preferences for different substances, and for me rape was a great tool maybe like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and right now I don't feel called to it at all. I did it maybe like a month or two ago in Costa Rica, and I felt like, okay, it's nice, but it's not for me for now. So I guess you need to also know your body, know how you react, and know whether this is a tool for you for now or not. And there are many tools that you can use. So doesn't have to be this one.
Yeah, I mentioned it more as it's also something that you would do on a daily, but it's something which you can do before using big trips. It's good to have a right setting, and it's used for ceremonies, and especially for things like ayahuasca and things like that. So yeah, I could also mention changa, which I am personally very interested in. It's like a mild version of DMT, which is smoked, and it creates a really altered state of mind where it's more spiritual rather than psychological. It's not something I would break down into thoughts trying to open analyze, even though I analyze every trip of mine, because I know it's like the way subconscious works, and there's much symbolism in it, and it has to do, let's say, like with geometry. It has to do with your subconscious emotions in a very I don't even know how to say, like, trippy way.
Yeah, it's hard to describe the experience sometimes in words, right? Because it's a felt experience.
It's impossible, but like I personally say it, like if you really want to connect to your spirit, to the higher, you want to reveal something to yourself what's deeply held inside. And I would say this is a very healing tool, especially for more deeper seated traumas, which we're not aware of. But again, it also has to be approached first with the right people in the right setting, and also prior to taking it, to kind of like get to know more about the substance itself. But I would say it with everything, like make your research, like really learn stuff before you take it. I mean, of course, I understand people who are like, okay, let's do it. But as I said, you don't know what's deeply inside of you. Maybe you never really confronted these parts of yourself. Maybe you live very no judgment, and like a shallow life, and you don't really go deeper. And these tools will take you deeper, and if you're not ready, it will hurt, and it can create some psychological damage too. And for that, you have to really be own your experience and be real with yourself. Like, okay, it might hurt, but I'm ready to do that. You have to be brave, because these things are not for fun, as you said.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say to a person who is experiencing a bad trip? Like, what would be your advice?
Honestly, I have my personal view on that, which doesn't work for everybody, because I've been personally in situations where I witnessed people having a bad trip, and I was kind of angry at these people, because I was like, everyone have a bad trip is a good trip. Own it. While you're in a trip, own it, let it go, face it, because there's nothing else you can do. The resistance creates the pain. The resistance creates the bad trip. But the bad trip in the end is a good trip, because you learn from it. But you can only learn from it while you are open to learn from it. And once you're resisting, you're closing the door to something you opened the door to. So it's like you're creating this pain for yourself. So I would say the first thing, don't come to psychedelics with the mentality, I'm afraid of the bad trip. Then it's better you don't touch these things at all. Because why would you do that? There's a big chance you will have a bad trip, and you're not going there for having a good time. You're going there to really learn and explore something deeper. But if let's say the person is already in a bad trip, depending on the setting, it's very important to have water around. Or for me personally, of course, it depends which substance we're talking about, but it's very important to have opportunity to go outside or be on the nature, have fresh air, because like physically your system can be overwhelmed and you might not know how to process your emotions, and you can start like vomiting or passing out or crying or being afraid, because the fear is the main thing about the bad trip, because there's something psychologically deeply inside you you're afraid or you were avoiding, and here you are faced with it, you know. So like, yeah, it has to, that's why I said earlier, you have to be brave, you have to have the courage to do that and know why you're doing it, and then the bad trip will not feel like a bad trip. But there's also such things, you can take a pill which stops the trip. There are other substances can like sober you up. Or
Well, I mean, I don't know any of these kind of pills that can stop your trip. So if you know any specific things that are, available for people, then please.
I mean, there's an underground version of this, and there's more like official version of it, because on the market you can, in the United States, you can buy pills which they're literally called trip stopper.
Oh,
And when you purchase some psychedelics, yes, you can take a pill, and that pill will help you to stop the trip or mild it down.
that's great. That's good to know.
But I would say, if we're talking, about like a mushroom trip or acid trip or something like that, in that way, you just need to have a right person around you to kind of like guide you out of it. And I would say, if I was there for a person, I would say, okay, let's breathe together. Let's do the breathing techniques together. Let's calm down and get the person into the present moment and just kind of lead them to the state of safety, and then just guide them out of it. It can be with the music, it can be with the water, it can be with the breathing, it can be with the holding a person. It depends what kind of bad trip the person is experiencing, because there are different ways of it can be a physical thing where people just can't process something on a physical level, and that can be psychological, it can be emotional. So depending on that, different kind of approach would be necessary.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree with you that there is no such thing as bad trip. I don't believe in bad trips, really. I believe that there is just a trip that brings out something that is subconscious within you, that is negative within you, but this is medicine that we are talking about. When we talk about, mushrooms or weed, it is medicine. It is plant medicine used by shamans for ages now, that we probably in our world in Europe right now, we don't even have we don't even know the tip of the iceberg of how this medicine can work. These are, Costa Rican shamans probably, or Peruvian shamans know more about this. And we're just kind of like touching the surface. But to me, also there's, no such thing as bad trip, because if you, as you said, don't have resistance to what's coming up, it can be really healing for you to allow this fear to come up, to allow this sadness, anger, whatever it is inside of you. And as you said, if you have this person next to you to be present with your emotions, because that's what we really need when we heal. We just need someone to be present with us, present with our emotions, because that's what's stemming from childhood, right? Usually in childhood, when we were suppressing some feelings, we didn't feel like we can express them to someone, and no one was present for us to process them. So now when we can give the person, during bad trip, quote unquote, this support, this connection, this love, breathing, calming, relaxing feelings, then it's not going to be a bad trip anymore, because maybe this person will feel safe enough to feel all these feelings, and then these feelings are going to get out of your system, because or out of their system, because they're going to be expressed rather than suppressed within them. And everything that is in subconscious, in the depth of our shadow, let's say, now comes to the awareness, comes to the light, and it can be healed. So I'm totally with you when it comes to like no bad trips. It's just like not a very good certain settings for the trip, but not that is like something that is bad for you. And people are scared sometimes, because I know some people that went crazy after taking psychedelic substances. So of course we need to be careful with that and not abuse them, and be careful to what kind of channels and what kind of energies we are opening ourselves up to. And if we are in a very negative state of mind and we have a lot of like low vibrational energy, we can open ourselves up to the things that we wouldn't really enjoy. But then again, we need to be really, really mindful of what we are doing and how we are doing it. And then we are completely good if we are in a safe environment and with safe people. So just need to remember that. And so on your journey, what was your most powerful or maybe just an experience that you would like to share with us on the substance? It was your maybe most favorite or most powerful or most revealing to you when it comes to yourself, the one that you're comfortable to share.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that was DMT for sure. And the most powerful one, which has the depth which no other substance ever took me to. Yeah, I consumed DMT intentionally for a trip, and I knew that I specifically need to deal with the inner child. And I also knew that it has to do with the rebirth, because it's like you literally dying. And in my case, I was dying. And I had to go back from the moment once I took it into the womb of my mother, and to experience the beginning or the root cause of my issue with my inner child. And once seeing myself, my mother being pregnant with me being in her womb, I could see and feel her emotions in that moment, which revealed to me the reason for why I have anxiety or worries or things that played out in my current life. And that, I think that was a profound thing for me. Like, I could, after that, it needed some time to process it. And when I told this story to many people a few times, I realized that more I tell this story, more I realize, like, okay, once you figured your powerful trip, you had your experience, once you figured that, okay, this would happen to me, then it's your job to fix it. Because the substance, DMT did its work. It showed me what it needed to show me. It doesn't mean that I'm healed from trauma, no. But that means I know what my trauma is about, and now I can consciously start working on it because I know the root cause of it. And I also know, for example, for me, it was also revealing that more about the pregnancy, like when women have children in their body, they have to be aware that all the emotions and the feelings that they feel will affect their children. And the child will be born with those emotions that the mother was carrying. It's very, like, for me, also make me aware, like, okay, in the future, when I think about pregnancy or think about these things, I know what I should not do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I also experience with my clients when I do completion process, which is this method of healing where you focus on the emotion that you have right now. And this emotion brings you back to the childhood wound, the very first time that you've experienced it. And often my clients also go back to the womb and they feel that, for example, someone cannot commit to the relationships now and they are afraid of commitment now. They come back to the womb where they felt that their mom is not committed to them because, for example, mother was scared of having a baby right now and she wasn't fully in it. And then they absorb this whole fear. And then, of course, on the session, we are processing it, we are letting it all out. And that's also something, this kind of tool we can use after the trip, for example, like the one you mentioned, to actually work with your inner child, to actually go there, relive this experience and let out all the feelings that you've absorbed or that you felt in this moment. And only then, when you actually accept and allow these feelings and let yourself feel them 100%, only then you can reach the state of peace and you feel like, okay, this is healed. And of course, there are a few other things that we do in the process on the session with me, for example, where you meet the needs of the inner child. You come there to this womb as an adult and you really nurture and you kind of like reparent your inner child so that all the unmet needs can be resolved and that inner child of us can feel really great. And in the further steps, you can take the child out of this womb and maybe move it into the womb of an angel, and then it will feel even better. And you can do a lot in your mind because your mind doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So these kind of tools like inner child work or completion process that I use, or there are many different methods that can reprogram the meaning and get rid of the emotional charge that was there in the memory, are really, really good to work together with psychedelics or even just without psychedelics, because then you can really make peace with what you've experienced. Because if you, for example, experience what you just said and then just left it and then didn't do anything about it, I believe that it could be even worse for you than if you haven't experienced it at all. Because if you know now what's happened and what trauma you have, and then you just don't care about it anymore, you consciously just are escaping from it and not doing anything about it, then I feel like it could be really detrimental, because then it's almost like you're abandoning your inner child again. And this part of you that felt so traumatized, now that you're aware of it, might feel even more just left or suppressed or disowned and rejected by you. So once you experience anything like that, and it could be on the substance or without it, really, it could be different trauma as well, it's important to actually go there again and to integrate this into yourself, because otherwise it could be really, really not cool for you. I believe.
Yeah, whatever. What you resist persists. So as long as you didn't fix something, it will come back into circle in a new form either way. So you can't run from yourself. You can't run from your traumas. And I think that's what we come here to experience. Like we come here to learn these things. And we have all these beautiful tools of psychedelics. And as long as we, approach them with a conscious and respectful mindset, we can learn a lot and we can heal a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminded me of this idea that one of my friends, Jason, he's a San Pedro shaman. I met him in Costa Rica. He doesn't call himself a shaman, but I do call him that. And I hope that I will be able to speak to him on SoulFam Podcast sometime soon. But he said something about this idea of the rise of a cannabis shaman. And I just remember that because it sounded almost like a book or video title, The Rise of a Cannabis Shaman. It just sounds so good. And what he meant by that is that if we could share with a lot of people who use weed recreationally, if we could share this wisdom that we can actually use it in shamanic therapeutic purposes, and for example, tell them to do it at home, by themselves, and use it as a tool to explore their subconscious mind. And if we can teach people that they can set up intentions before they do it, and if people can start doing it more consciously, we could really live in a different society, especially in these countries where marijuana is legal, because people would actually use it as it was meant to use by, ancient healers and shamans, and not just recreationally now, for the party or for, just to get a good taste of food that you eat soon.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I believe that we need to create programs for people once in those countries where it gets legalized, so people have opportunity to, especially for those people who do it for the first time or just getting into it because it gets legal or whatever, then they can use these programs to use this methodically and help themselves consciously in their houses, in their homes. I think that's really cool. But again, as I want to repeat myself again, it's very important for people to know their history of mental disorders and things like that, because all the psychoactive things will affect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's good to repeat it because then people remember that it's quite an important thing to know. So yeah, absolutely. And so just out of curiosity, because maybe some people are curious about this, how did you start your spiritual journey, your spiritual evolution, or just exploring your inner self?
I mean, I always been curious to begin with. As I remember myself, I was always looking for higher meaning in everything, like since I was a kid. But my main journey started, I don't even remember which year. I think it started in 2012 when I was like self-reflecting a lot, and I started consuming cannabis when I was 17. But of course, it was a different way of consumption, and I didn't really know what I was consuming and for which reason. I was rather just like exploring and trying things out. But I do remember when I smoked, I used to write poetry and then later read it and kind of like look at it and be like, oh my God, it reveals so many answers. It reveals so many subconscious things. And then I just started writing more and channeling my creative energy and then reflecting on it. And I think that was a beginning, even though at that time I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't think that I was spiritual. I was like just doing whatever I'm doing, And later on, I just started progressing with that stuff. I just started digging more deeper into myself or reality around me or people around me, noticing synchronicities. And so I don't know what was exactly the trigger. I think it was initially like my life purpose to kind of like work with these things.
Okay, so last question. What would be your 3 tips for people who are on their self-development path and want to explore more when it comes to healing or maybe even psychedelics, or for them to know what your most effective or most powerful tools or methods or ways of approaching this journey are?
First, we already mentioned that is intention. That's the foundation of everything what you do in your life. And especially when we go to the deeper things, you have to know your intention and be really clear and honest about it, because that will set the course for the rest of the stuff that you're doing. So yeah, make sure you get your intention right and you know what you're doing. Yeah. Second, I would say it's like a therapy. Like, well, I'm personally very interested in that, but let's say you have to understand psychology or how the brain works or how in society we function and what causes what. And I think it doesn't have to be some big degree thing. It's just something you should pay attention for your reactions. For example, how do you react to the world and how you function. It's about getting to know yourself, because without that, there's no point of doing anything, because everything stems from the inside. So the first thing after you have set intention, you work with yourself. Like, yes, there can be people involved, there can be substances involved, but the main center of all of it is still you. So you have to work with you and create a good relationship with yourself, knowing that this is a journey you're living, so you're on it fully responsible for yourself. And the third tip, yeah, in the end of the day, we're all gonna die. So live openly, fiercely, live with enthusiasm, and live with love. Spread love. It's about spreading love and spreading light and not avoiding darkness, because the darkness and the light in the end of the day is one thing. Just own your experience and just be true to yourself. Yeah.
Beautiful. Something like that. Beautiful. I love these words. I love these, especially the last tip. Just, yeah, spread the love, live your light. And yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for this beautiful talk. And it was a pleasure for me to have you here. And I hope to see you on our podcast and hear you in the future as well.
Thank you. For sure. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Karolina.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, beautiful people, for being with us today, watching us or listening to us. I loved chatting to Sandra, our Psychedelic Explorer, and I hope you liked the interview as well. And so I will see you next time. Much love to you.